Hello everyone and welcome to episode 13 of Age Gap Love Story. We are Carrie and Alan and we are a married couple with a 32.5-year age difference. And we started this podcast and YouTube channel to offer information, support, and community to help make your age gap relationship successful. So if you're new here, welcome. And if you are a returning listener, then we are so happy to have you. We also have a YouTube channel where we record our episodes on video and we upload them to YouTube as well. So whether you're on the podcast or you're watching us on YouTube, we're really happy to have you here. And we got a comment. It was kind of a rude comment, actually. It said, "Why don't you tell your ages?" And well, one of the reasons is we hope that people continue to listen to this podcast in the future. And so I feel like if we tell our ages, then it won't be really relevant in the future. But it is the year 2020. And as of today, I am 45 and Alan is 78. And the reason I said that person was rude was because that particular person left a bunch of comments on YouTube and they were really rude, like said, I don't know, made comments on our appearance and stuff. I ended up blocking that person. But you know, if you are in an age gap relationship or you're on YouTube, you know that you get random hateful comments, and that is just the nature of being on the internet. And our best advice, we did a whole podcast episode on this, how to deal with hate, and really it's best to ignore them and recognize that that kind of input is more about the person than it is about us or about you, and it's just really best to try to ignore that, wouldn't you say?
Yes, and I do want to emphasize that even though I am 78 and a half actually this month, that I have been told many times by several people, including strangers, that I don't look a day over 77. So I take that as a compliment. Also, we've had a couple of comments from our listeners and viewers asking why I look about 4 inches shorter than Carrie on our YouTube channel. And the reason is that Carrie usually is sitting cross-legged, which makes her a good 3 or 4 feet taller than me. I am not really a pygmy. I guess I'm average height, as is Carrie. So I thought I'd clear that up.
Not that there's anything wrong with being a pygmy. We don't want to discriminate.
No, if we have any pygmy listeners out there, please, we love you.
Okay, so today we are talking about 6 mistakes to avoid in age gap relationships and how to resolve them. We thought hopefully this would be a helpful episode. And before we get into it, we want to share a word from our sponsors. The first one being Thrive Market, which I think is a great option for this world that we're living in right now, where it's harder to get out and go shopping. We're still staying indoors as much as we can because of the pandemic, or we're trying to consolidate our shopping trips. And Thrive Market is an online grocery store. It's a great place to buy healthy food items. We have a special link that can give you a free gift up to a $22 value when you purchase the Thrive Market membership, and I will link that in the description box below or in the show notes. And then also we have a second sponsor, Medterra CBD, and Alan and I both take CBD. We think Medterra is a great brand. It is certified free of THC, and the coupon code is AGEGAP for 15% off. And I will also link our Medterra CBD, I will link their website in the description box and the show notes. So let's jump in to our 6 mistakes to avoid and how to fix them. So why don't we, do you want me to start or do you want to start? You want me to start? Okay, so the first one would be to expect that your age gap relationship is immune to the normal challenges of relationships, whether you're married or you're in a new relationship or a long-term relationship. To expect that even though you're in love and you have a wonderful connection with your partner, just to think that you aren't going to run into any issues at all. Or the other mistake kind of related to this is to blame any relationships problems that you do come across, you blame them on your age difference instead of maybe just addressing your differences. Do you want to give a comment?
Yes. And on that point, and we may have touched on this in previous podcast, and that is that there are definitely going to be physical differences depending upon the actual amount of the gap in your ages. One individual, the older of the two, may have certain limitations, certain physical issues, whether they're health or simply abilities or duration, for example, for exercise or hiking or traveling, whatever the case may be. And those things you have to appreciate up front and come to live with them. And from the older person's perspective, you have to appreciate that the younger person has abilities that are greater than your own. And if they want to be more active and do things, you have to be tolerant of that and work out some sort of middle ground. So I think those are all part of the issues that you have to adapt to and accept. On a similar point, there are differences in your life's journey. For example, one individual, the senior of the two, whether it's the male or the female or whatever, may be either at the end of their career or retired or well beyond retirement. And the other may be, again, depending upon the spread in the age gap, may be out of college or in a career that they're thinking about either extending or changing or going back for more education. And so there can be quite a divergence on your life's path. And you do have to be sensitive to the fact that one person has ambition and the other person wants to go back to a more leisurely life and travel and enjoy things without working. So these are issues you need to address up front, and certainly when you're in the relationship, definitely adapt to.
So you jumped ahead. We were talking about number 1, which was expecting your relationship is immune to challenges and blaming the relationship's problems on the age difference instead of addressing them. And you jumped ahead to number 2, which was not being sensitive to the unique challenges of each person's place in life. And Alan mentioned this, but for example, if one person is at the end of his or her career or retired, and the other person is still deciding what he or she wants to do with his or her life, this can be kind of a specific mistake, I guess, that could happen in age gap relationships. Because in a relationship where both people are the same age, then it could still happen, but it's less likely that you're going to have such a drastic difference in life stages. And so that would be the second mistake. And then how to fix them, I guess, would be, having the understanding or the appreciation that you are at different life stages. And I think one thing that Alan and I have come up against is he's obviously older than I am, and so he has things where like he maybe wants to see, let's see, what's somewhere that you wanted to see? Like he has a fascination with Pompeii, which, if you're not familiar, is a site, ancient site in Italy that was destroyed by a volcano. And you can see the ruins. And we actually did go there on a cruise, but we were there just for a brief amount of time, maybe 2 or 3 hours. And so I'm sure Alan would love to go back and explore it and really do a trip. And then, so in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I don't really want to take the time to do it now. Of course, now in a pandemic, we're not going anywhere. But in my mind, it's always like, oh, maybe in the future. But in Alan's mind, he's kind of like, the future is now. If we're going to do it, let's do it now. So that's maybe a kind of an example of maybe me not really appreciating that, he wants to do things while he still feels able and strong enough to travel and those kinds of things. Where in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm in my 40s, I still have lots of time to do those things. That's maybe kind of a small example. Of course, it can play out much stronger and can have a much bigger impact on your relationship if you're talking about bigger issues. Do you have more to say on that?
I have something to say on a different, but yet
You're
related.
not jumping ahead again,
No,
are you?
no, no, I won't jump ahead. I'm sorry. I thought we were moving on to the next point. Oh, see, I get beat up like this all the time, but I can handle it because we compromise, and that's one reason why we get along so well. Yeah, we're kissing and making up. The point I wanted to make, addressing a comment you made a moment ago, is that even if there isn't an age gap, there can be, for lack of a better word, a maturity gap or experience gap in same age relationships. For example, or if there's just a minor difference in your ages, one person may have had a great deal of work experience or a substantial amount of education on a particular topic, or may have been in a position where they traveled extensively and therefore have a more worldly or global understanding of things in life, in contrast to the other person. So there can be great disparities even in same or similar age relationships. So these are just common. You do have to compromise and make changes in any relationship. And I think recognizing those, talking about them is really important. But before you can do that, you have to identify them. And of course, the best time to do that is early on in your relationship as you're getting to know each other before you get really deeply involved.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, number 3 would be assuming, number 3 in terms of the mistakes that we have identified in potential mistakes in age gap relationships. So assuming that each of you won't change or grow over time. And that can be a mistake if you don't appreciate that your partner may change, really at any point in your relationship. So I think, and of course this could also apply again to same age relationships, but the point is that you really want to try to grow together, or at least respect the growth and the changes that the other person is having.
Yes, I think this is an important point because people change physically, as we discussed earlier, just by aging. Their mental attitude changes, again, based on experience. Chemically, from the standpoint of brain chemistry and body chemistry, people change. So, just like the world, from second to second, from millisecond to millisecond, things do change. A personal experience I had way back in my past when this really was in my face, and I realized that going forward in life was that I had not seen a fellow I'd been in college with for years. And we got together. He happened to stop by being in our neighborhood, and we sat down to chat. And like in the first few minutes, his life had gone in one direction. He wasn't married, didn't have family, was, even though he had a college education, was in a very mundane job, for lack of a better description. At least it was mundane for me. And I had gone on into a very different path of life. And I realized quickly, it just slapped me in the face, as close as we were in college. I mean, we spent a lot of time together. We had a group of friends, and we all did things together. And I mean, if we didn't see each other during the week several times, it was, you left a hole. And at this moment, in current time, when I met with him, I realized we had absolutely nothing other than our history in common. And it was actually quite shocking.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about when you and I met, I had really no interest or experience in the career that I'm working in now. And so I think it's great that actually the career now, which I'm working in like wellness, and I'm a food blogger and that kind of thing, you kind of share the interest and you're interested in what I'm doing. And your career, of course, has changed a lot over the time that we've been together, but I continue to be interested in what you're doing and try to help encourage your new interests, which are now more hobbies because you are pretty much retired now.
Yes, and specifically on that point, the fact that you have divergent experiences, divergent interests in life, the divergent education can be a real plus. One thing I welcome is that when I do ask Carrie for a comment, maybe on something, a draft of a letter or an email or a proposal or something I'm working on, she has a very different point of view than I would have. And so it's very refreshing to get it, and it's very helpful. And I think likewise in Carrie's area of expertise, because I'm not in it as deeply as she is, more on the outside looking in, I can give her a comment and maybe on a point she hadn't thought of, but yet it's valuable.
Good. So let's move on to number 4, which is the fourth mistake that we've identified, potential mistakes in age gap relationships. And this one can be a big one, and it's not respecting your partner's previous life events and maybe holding those things against that person. And I think you and I have been careful not to do this, but an example would be the fact that Alan, he was married before me, he had children before me, and I never want to throw that experience in his face, or I don't know, like make him feel bad for having had all this like a relationships before me, and he's never done that, made me feel bad about the relationships that I had before him. And because I mean that would kind of be a waste of time, because you really can't change the past, and it doesn't really make sense to hold that person's previous experiences against them.
Yes, and Carrie's wonderful in that respect, in that she appreciates the devotion I have to my daughters and doesn't see that as competition to our relationship. But specifically to the point that Carrie makes, we had a couple, and the wife confided to Carrie that the husband was very upset and jealous every time he would think about previous relationships she had. And she asked Carrie how I felt about Carrie's previous relationships. And my response is, and I think we may have covered this in a previous podcast, is that whatever your partner has done in their previous life made them the person they are today, and that is the person that you love and respect. So I look at it as a plus in shaping that person rather than a minus.
Yeah, and I think it can be a fine line, especially now with social media and stuff. You know, if you're, you do have to be careful. If you're, friends with an ex on Facebook and you're communicating and stuff, there is a fine line for that. And, we don't want to go too deep into this, but, you always have to be respectful of your current partner. And if you're doing any hiding of those kinds of things, then I think that's going to spell trouble. But if you can be honest about it and that kind of thing, then I don't think it's going to be troublesome. But there's a fine line there. But yeah, and I will say also that I think dealing with children of the previous relationship, that can also be one of the hardest situations to manage in not just an age gap relationship, but if you're with somebody who has children from a previous marriage or a previous relationship, that can be really, really, really tricky. And maybe if that is something that you're dealing with and it's really hurting your relationship, I think that would be a perfect opportunity to try to find a marriage and family therapist, because again, dealing with children, now Alan's children were grown when we met. We've talked about this before, so it really hasn't been an issue, but I could see if they were younger, and that could really be a hard time. So let's move on to number 5, which would be mistake that you could potentially make would be not respecting your partner's differences in cultural references. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, first thing pops into mind, although I'm not sure this would be a cultural reference, more of a preference, and that is politically. I mean, one person may be very conservative when it comes to politics, and then the other may be very liberal. And these are things you have to agree to disagree on, like perhaps many others. At the outset, if you don't and you bicker about it, it could be very destructive. Other issues are that one person may like one type of entertainment, whether it's music or old movies, and the other person may be more in the, like punk rock or, I don't know what the stuff is, some of it, but anyway, if it encroaches on the free time of one person at the other person's displeasure, that it could be a real issue. So we've fortunately been able to address that, and there are programs that Carrie wants to watch. She can do it on her own time, and it doesn't bother me because I have programs I want to watch that she doesn't like, boy shows, and she has girl shows, and whatever the case may be, just a different interest. But we've been able to blend some of those things. Carrie introduced me to like a lot of the stuff on YouTube, which I find I really like, and other venues. And I've introduced her actually some time ago to black and white movies, which she always thought prior to this we're not really worth looking at. And so we've opened up worlds for each other and made the best of it. And it's worked out quite well.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I love that you tell me like old stories about, for instance, we used to live in the LA area and Los Angeles area, and Alan told me about going to Disneyland when it first opened and things like that, that if I was with somebody my own age, I never would have known about some of these things that you introduced me to, and more getting me interested in history and things like that. And then I feel like I've introduced you to maybe more modern things like Pilates and I don't know, just like topics around nutrition and stuff like that. So
yes, and on the topic of entertainment, not to beat this drum too much, but I recorded a bunch of old silent Buster Keaton movies from the 20s and introduced Carrie to those. They were on Turner Classic Movies, and some of them she really liked, some of his really highly acclaimed movies. And we were just watching last night a DVD on The Postman Rings Twice, which was made in 1946 with Lana Turner and John Garfield. And we actually went after the movie and looked at the history of Lana Turner because she had quite a movie career, including some scandals that I remember and told Carrie about.
yeah, that movie is actually kind of funny because it is an older man and a younger woman, and then there's a younger guy that comes into this picture. But I think the difference is that she married her older husband not out of love, but because of convenience and
Security.
So, but it is an interesting movie, and she was beautiful, really, really beautiful. So, yeah, I mean, my parents were not into old movies, and so I was never introduced to these kind of topics. And just the fact that Alan grew up in California and has so much familiarity with the entertainment industry, I find all that very fascinating. And, so that's worked out really well for the two of us. I would say that music is probably the thing that we've had the hardest time. I guess, like, it's just difficult. If you listen to songs in high school, your partner likely listened to very different songs. But, it's fine.
We both like Hawaiian music.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of music that we agree on. It's just that our cultural references are very different, but we just try to have respect for each other's references and not, I don't immediately dismiss them as old-fashioned or anything. I just try to be respectful that this is, the time period that Alan grew up in. And he, I think, does the same for me. Do you want to introduce the last one, number 6?
No, you do it.
Okay, you're funny. Number 6 for potential age gap relationships mistakes that you could make would be not expecting or learning how to handle judgment from other people around your age gap. This is just sad but true that people are going to say things and they're not always going to be positive, and people are going to, try to warn you that this isn't going to work, blah, blah, blah. We've heard it all. And I just find it to be very frustrating, but I've learned to deal with it. And the fact that everybody has their own opinion, it does not mean that they're right or they have any idea of what your love is like for each other or your relationship. And it can be really hurtful, and it can maybe cast doubt in your mind, but you've got to learn to deal with it.
Yes, I think we covered this in one of our earlier podcasts. And some people can be annoying without actually intending to be hurtful and can ask questions. I think we had addressed again earlier on in our podcast about how people mistake me for your father, or people will ask, is that your father or your boyfriend? Or like when we went shopping for cars once, the salesman said, is your daddy going to pay for this? And that's when I had to restrain Carrie. I think he wanted to choke him a little. But anyway, so things happen. But remember, the only people you can control in life, and it's difficult enough, is controlling yourself. You can't control what other people say or do. So, you just live with it, live and let live, and you have to kind of move away from any pain or emotional injury it may cause, and get on with your own life. Let's be positive. You can't change people. You can't change the past. You really can't predict the future. All we have to live for is today. So, each day when you get up, you say, hey, today's going to be a great day. Because if you don't, you're going to make your day less than great. And that's not a good thing. And anyway, I have one parting thought after you give your parting thoughts.
Well, I'm not quite ready to give a parting thought. I wanted to say that when you're getting judgment about your age gap relationship, I think the hardest time for that to deal with it is in the beginning, and maybe worse for the younger partner, although I think it can affect the older partner too. But if you're in a new relationship, this is your first age gap relationship, and you're questioning it yourself, but you feel that the connection is real, but then you're getting all this judgment, it can tear you apart. And I remember that feeling. And so if you're in that situation, I just want to give you some empathy. But the thing is, I knew in my heart that Alan and I were meant for each other. But it was really hard when people were casting doubts and just bringing up all these issues. What's going to happen in the future? Blah, blah, blah. So the thing is, now we've been together for over 20 years. So now, if anybody says anything, it's like, well, look, we have 20 years of relationship success. And we don't know what the future holds. Nobody knows what the future holds. But at least we have a track record. So if anybody says anything like, well, how are you going to actually live together? And how are you going to agree on things? And it's like, well, we've already dealt with that and we're dealing with it, and it's just fine and it's great. But early on, it really can make you wonder. So again, if that's where you are, but you know that this love is real, then I would encourage you just to try to suppress those outside voices.
Yes, and on this very topic, I would like to introduce a new motto for our podcast. And it is, are you ready? You might want to write this down. Be bold, go old. Carrie doesn't like that. We hadn't discussed this earlier. Okay, but also, are we close to the end?
Sure.
Okay, we have had, I can't tell you how many requests. I did this in an earlier episode, and people have requested more of my original Hawaiian music. So I'm just going to give you a little taste. That's all. Carrie poked me.
Okay, I think we are definitely at the end of this episode. I think Alan is a little nuts today. So thank you so much for listening. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode. And until then, stay well. We'll see you soon. Bye.